This is Shawn.
Hey, Shawn, it's Abby.
Hey, Abby. How you doing?
Oh,
Sorry about that. I was just, my vet just called just to check in on something, so I had to, take that
no,
real quick.
no problem at all. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. How about
Good.
you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for talking to me about your plush and the process of manufacturing. It's something that I'm super interested in, and I think lots of my blog readers will be really interested to hear about. And it's actually pretty difficult to find someone who's made a go of it and been pretty successful. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah, you bet. I'm happy to, and I think there's a lot of, be happy to share as many of the hurdles as I can and some of the victories as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I guess let's just start out if you want to tell me a little bit about the way that Shawnimals started and kind of developed in the early years.
Sure. Well, I had been working at a job, as a game reviewer for a magazine called Electronic Gaming Monthly for a number of years, and as fun as that was, things were changing in the game industry, and I decided to leave that job, and I went back to college to get my degree in painting and fine arts. So during that time, I'd kind of seen some like import plush toys that I thought were interesting because it wasn't like your traditional teddy bears and bunnies and stuff like that, but it was more based on imaginary characters, and I really liked that, about them, that they were more like the kind of stuff that I would draw, like little doodles of weird characters and stuff in the margins of sketch pads or notepads and so on. And at that time, I'd also been collecting a bunch of characters from my sketchbooks, kind of cutting them out and recompiling them in a almost like a character library, if you will, just trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this stuff. So when I saw the import plush toys, I thought that'd be kind of interesting. Maybe I could turn them into some sort of sculptural, like a plush toy, maybe, or something else like that. And I had traditionally worked in 2D with drawings and paintings, and as fun as that is, again, I had an opportunity to just kind of explore while I was in college, and that was a medium that I hadn't really considered prior to that. So my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and my mom, for that matter, gave me some supplies and needles and thread and some fabrics, and my mom actually gave me a sewing machine and just started making these goofy plush toys in my college apartment. And at that time, it wasn't really a business, and certainly there wasn't anything like Etsy. There really was no kind of clearinghouse except for maybe a couple of forums, and then just building your own website. So I just put it online, more of a way to show my friends what I was doing, and eventually they became Shawnimals. I kind of thought it more of a business, and it was handmade for much of its early life, for about, I'd say, a solid 6 years of that time. We did everything by hand.
And did you sell on Etsy? Did you start with an Etsy shop once Etsy started up in 2005?
No, by that time we had a pretty solid following, and we had good traffic to our website, and we were able to sell direct to people via that website. So as much as I think Etsy is an amazing forum and community and way to sell things, we just didn't really have to utilize that. And then, shopping cart systems became a little bit more affordable and a little easier to use. So we kind of stuck with what we had and then just focused on that.
So then tell me about how I know you have some manufactured toys and you still make handmade toys now as part of Shawnimals line, but I'm interested in how you decided to transition to having some toy patterns manufactured, and I guess about what that process entailed, sort of what the research end of it looked like and the financials, and then sort of how it's gone for you.
Well, when we first, as we grew, basically, we've always taken a very natural sort of evolutionary approach to business, and we weren't as interested. I didn't get my degree in business. I got my degree in art, so I've always really been more focused on the kind of the creative bottom line than the financial one, for better or worse, depending on who you talk to. But the thing was is we liked making things by hand. but we also didn't want to become manufacturers. And I think that was really a wake-up call for us. Is we were growing and we were selling, and that's all fine and good, and we were making a lot of products, so that's a good problem to have. But then ThinkGeek, we started dealing more with stores. I should kind of preface it with that. We started selling wholesale to stores, and sort of out of the blue, ThinkGeek, a buyer at ThinkGeek, had contacted us and asked if we would be willing to wholesale our We Ninja plush to them, Pocket Ninjas, and
can you just tell us what ThinkGeek is for people who might not know?
Yeah, so you definitely should know if you don't. All of your readers out there, ThinkGeek's an amazing website that it's a web store that has countless numbers of hilarious, geeky, useless but absolutely needed things. A lot of stuff is most of it's pop cultural. Some of it's nerdy and sort of scientific. Other stuff is just kind of referencing some sort of pop cultural phenomenon, like in our case, ninjas and so on.
So they got your sense of humor and liked your products enough to place a significant wholesale order, which probably meant for you making things one by hand, significant stress on your end.
Yeah, and I think that's really it's again, it's like, wow, this is amazing. That's so much money, and so much more money than we ever really had coming from a store before. But at the same time, that's just one sort of simple byproduct of this process, and the rest of it is making literally hundreds and hundreds of ninjas. And that's when it becomes unfun. And and it's not just about fun. It's about like, okay, what is my role? And if I'm a designer and maker, that's fine. I'm not a manufacturer though, and I think that there's a reason why there's companies and factories that do this kind of stuff when it becomes sort of unruly. And that's really how we made our decision. Is we realized we had filled that initial order for, off the top of my head, 500 units of We Ninjas and another 300 units of Pocket Ninjas. So it's like 800 units total. And they needed it by a certain date. So we knew that there's no way we were going to be able to have these things manufactured in our factory. So our only option was, and they were okay with this, was to make them by hand. So we did so, and we had kind of a work party where we invited our friends over, and we said, okay, here's what we need to do. We need your help. We'll buy you pizza. We'll buy you drinks. But we need to get this going as soon as possible. So we did, and we were able to complete the order and get everything shipped out, and it was awesome.
But that doesn't seem like a sustainable model in the long term.
Exactly. That's exactly the problem. So a lot of your readers are familiar with a wholesale model, and at least in designer toys, a lot of the times basically you're selling to a store at 50% off of retail.
Right.
Now you can kind of wiggle that a little bit in terms of, because it's handmade, it's a higher value, and it should have a higher value. So maybe you're dealing with 40% off of retail instead. So you get 60% of that retail price for your work. But still, that's the model. So even though we were making some money off of those, it was not nearly as much as you might think. And they're selling them for $20 a pop. So we're getting like 10. And that adds up over time, especially when you're dealing with that many units, and it just
right. So a lot of us are in that role, are in that position where we are faced with this exact problem, where one of our designs, or maybe a few, have become really popular, and there's demand for them, and people start to suggest maybe you need to get this manufactured somewhere, and that would be more reasonable. However, I know that getting a design manufactured often means, first of all, a significant upfront financial investment, and also ordering the minimum number of units that you can order is often in the thousands, and then you're faced with having to store and distribute all of those units. So what about that hurdle?
Well, I think I can't really speak as much to U.S.-based manufacturing. I can say that it exists. We're currently exploring it. And in Chicago, we found a couple great possibilities. A lot of those have to do with more of cut and sew facilities that work primarily with fashion and handbags and those sorts of things. So it's not a stretch for them to kind of work out something that would be more plush toy-based.
Interesting.
But there's definitely some education that's going to need to happen to get that worked out, because it is not the same thing. And at this point, we don't even know if we're going to get a finished product. We might just get the sewn sort of body, maybe some applique, but we may need to finish it. And that's certainly an option, and it makes it a little bit more sustainable. But as far as dealing with factories outside of the U.S. or even larger factories within the U.S. for that matter, you're going to deal with minimums. Your cost per items are going to be absolutely lower than what you're dealing with now in most cases, but you have to think about things like testing. You have to think about freight costs to get it here. And then you need then kind of most important of all, and this is less tangible in terms of price, is quality control. It's as much as you think it was a science, it's definitely not. It's a much more fluid process, and we've seen it's really run the gamut in terms of quality. Even something that was approved and absolutely perfect initially, then ended up coming to us, and some were great, but then other units in that production run weren't. They simply didn't look good and they weren't sellable.
Uh-huh.
And that's if when you're dealing with minimums of say 2,000 to 3,000 pieces, it can really sting, if it's too high of a percentage. And even if there's recourse, and often there is, but even if there's recourse and you get those units remade, how long are you going to have to wait to get those? Because of course they are coming from, in the case of China, they're going to either be air freighted, which is very costly, or sent on a boat, which is just usually 30 to 45 days.
Wow. Right.
So I think the idea is that, okay, well, if I do have this manufactured in a factory, then hey, it's going to be super cheap, and then I can still charge the same amount or maybe a little less, but then make that much more money. And the reality of it is, it's not as cheap as you think.
Right, because
especially
you're
when you add
paying
all
for
this stuff in.
Yeah, you're paying for testing, you're paying for the shipping from the overseas factory, and then you're paying
Right.
shipping again from where you are to where they're eventually going to go.
So if you're working with a distributor, certainly you have to factor that in. And if let's say you do find a factory that's able to produce 500 units, you work with someone that you find the right partner, right, and they are able to do 500 units for you.
Which is really small. I mean, 500 units is a very small minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That would be like you hit the jackpot if it's
right,
good
Right,
quality.
that doesn't seem to exist. They all seem to be in the thousands.
Absolutely. But my point is that even if you were to find someone, let's do a more realistic number. Let's say you get them down to 1,000 pieces.
Okay.
And your testing costs are $500 to $700. Well, then all of a sudden your per unit cost, you're adding another 50 to 70 cents per unit. And that's really tricky.
Right. Now, is the testing done? Is that something that's done in the United States for U.S. standards, or is that done overseas in the factory in China? Where is the testing done?
There's third-party labs all over the country. Many of those are U.S. Run companies, but they're certified third-party labs, and they have offices in most kind of points of manufacture. So you'll find tons in China. You'll find some in Mexico. You'll find some in Europe. But they all test based on industry standards, but dependent upon what you're making.
Okay. So tell me about the very first sort of experience with having one design. Was it one design that you had initially manufactured?
We decided to do 4.
Okay.
We knew that obviously with the ThinkGeek order, we knew that the Wii Ninjas and Pocket Ninjas were doing well, and they had always done well for us, so that was a no-brainer. We had also we had our mustachio character, which is a larger mustachio, which is the mustache with a mustache, and then a smaller version. Thank you very much. And then a smaller version, which is a pocket stash. So it's just basically it's a mustache with eyes. It's like a baby mustachio, in other words. So we knew that those were the 4 that we wanted to do because those were our 4 most popular characters. And so we went to our family and we said, hey, friends and family for that matter, because they had offered, some of those people had offered to us in the past to help us out if we needed help financially, basically like a loan. So we went to them and said, hey, you remember how you said that before? Well, now's the time because we want to step this up because we're beyond our capacity. It's becoming unfun, and we want to meet this demand, at least with these characters. Still maintain a handmade part of our business, but at least for these, because we can't meet demand, let's have these manufactured. So we were able to raise around $20,000 through quite a few different family and friends, and that helped us with our first round of manufacturing.
And how many? So you had 4 designs. So how many of each design did you get?
That was like in 2007. So I want to say that we had to get like 2,000 or 3,000 of each.
Of each.
I mean, at that time, yeah. So we ended up having like, I think, either between 8,000 and 10,000 units or something like that.
Okay, so they all came in, and then you had to store them, I'm assuming, before being able to distribute them yourselves.
Yeah. So what we did, we had started working with a distributor. Well, really, it's kind of a broker. It's a company called DKE Toys, and he focuses specifically on collectible toys and designer toys. So we had already been working with him in some capacity, and we knew that with this run, we could work with him in a much easier way. We didn't necessarily have to make things on demand. You would have a running inventory. So he has a warehouse. So we were able to ship those units to him in Los Angeles, and then he basically warehoused those. I can't remember the cost, but there is a cost associated with that. And then as a sort of broker, there's a percentage he takes because he'll solicit his list of stores. They'll place orders with him, and then he takes a percentage, and we're paid out on a monthly basis.
Right. Okay.
And then there again, when you talk about cost per item, there's the manufacturing cost per item and all the things that go into the manufacture and shipping of receiving the item. But then there's the sort of extra cost then associated with actually getting that item into stores in some cases if you're working with a distributor, or even just simply selling it outright, as people know, with Etsy fees and so on, PayPal fees.
Right. Okay. So I hope you don't mind if I ask, but did you recoup the loan that your friends and family so nicely offered to you?
Yeah, and I think that's, this is a whole other tangent we can kind of get onto, but the quick version is, when we took that money, we use an accountant. We are formed as an LLC, so we knew that we wanted to do this right, not just for the business, but these are people that we love, and we're not going to accidentally screw them over. So we had a promissory note that we entered into these loans officially with these people, and we made sure that they had a very specific payment schedule, and they knew the terms of this loan, and if we defaulted, there was repercussions that we had to face. And many of them were like, this is not necessary. You don't have to do all this. And I'm like, no, actually, we really, really do, because as confident as we are about this stuff, we don't know. I mean, stuff happens, and we don't want our friends and family to be out of money.
Right.
So, I think it's really important. That's just as an aside. People definitely if you're doing this, even if it's a side business, just take it seriously.
I think you're totally right about that. And forming an LLC was also a very wise decision. So after that experience, which was probably a huge learning curve,
it was.
Yeah. So did you going forward? Did you continue to? It sounds like you did continue to place some manufacturing orders between. When was that? That was in 2007. You said.
Yeah.
Until now.
Yeah, so what we did back then, we knew that there was a significant, like you said, there's a huge learning curve. And one way that you can kind of mitigate that is by working with a manufacturing rep. Now, there's a lot of people can argue both sides of that because, there is additional cost associated with working with a rep. But a good rep is going to have connections to factories and understand what you want to make and understand what the capabilities of the factory are. And they basically connect you to the right factory. And ideally, they have solid relationships. So in terms of feeling safe, know that things are going to be done properly, that you're getting good value, and it doesn't necessarily mean you want it super cheap, but you're getting a good quality product at a reasonable market price. And also deal with some of the issues like export and import. Manufacturing rep definitely does a lot of hand-holding, and in fact does a lot of the work that we would have had to do otherwise.
Yeah, that sounds like a wise decision. I mean, you're paying more, but it sounds as though a lot of the headache is taken off of your plate.
Yeah, especially for our first foray into this world. Does it make sense for us to have one now? No, it doesn't make as much sense. But we only know that because of what we've learned over the number of years. And for certain products, it's not our area of expertise. Like let's say we wanted to go into, I don't know, backpacks or something. Like you could argue that it's still textiles, but we might find a rep that has connections to that world. So we know that we're not going to have this kind of huge learning curve yet again.
Right.
But for plush, we feel pretty confident dealing directly with factories now.
Right, because you've got the connections that you need. Okay, great. So is there any other words of wisdom or encouragement or discouragement that you might have for, aspiring plush makers who might aspire to having some of their designs manufactured or sort of taking their business up to this level?
Well, I guess just a few things. The top one is well, let me think. Maybe this is important, but I won't do them in no particular order. Let's do it this way. And this isn't targeting Etsy specifically because we see this across the board, and it doesn't even necessarily always have to do with our stuff. There's a lot of examples of this. If you happen to make something that's really awesome, and then you find out later that someone else was doing it first, just take the lump, and take it off your site.
Yeah.
Because there's varying degrees of big time, and we've dealt with this a lot on Etsy in particular, and I hate it. I hate it all around because we're not big. Are we bigger than some people? Yes, but we're not big. We're not big like Ugly Doll is big. We're
Right.
not big like certainly not like mainstream toys are big. So just know that like when you make something and it happens to be like someone else's who did it first, you could very well be affecting someone directly, and that's kind of a bummer. I mean, it's not happy no matter what side of it you're on, but just address it. Don't take it
Right.
personal. Just try to work through it. I mean, I think that's
part of everybody who makes something and puts it online has had the experience of having it copied by
yes.
somebody else without credit to them. And I think that's a pretty universal experience, I feel like, at this point.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's important to
sort of
to
take it like in an upstanding way and remove it and move forward. Okay, so that's good.
Absolutely.
That's definitely good advice. Any other words of wisdom?
I think there's I used to think about dealing with handmade versus manufactured goods in kind of a more of a black and white way, and I think that's really the wrong way of doing it. And we live in a time now where you can have both as long as you're clear about what it is, and that was really an important thing for us to learn is it doesn't have to be all one or the other. If you start manufacturing goods, should you sell it on Etsy? Absolutely not. But if you have your own website and you do handmade goods, but then you also manufacture goods, just be clear about what each is,
Right.
and that's been amazing for us. We love hand making stuff. That's like core to who we are. But we also know that from our experience, it's not really that fun to make thousands and thousands of the same thing.
Right.
So
you've managed to have a company that blends the two and pretty successfully so that you can continue to do the parts that you think are fun and have the handmade nature of your company still exist, while at the same time meet these larger wholesale orders and have a wider distribution.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's a pretty unique situation, and I think that's pretty great.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's important. Like, there's been a lot of talk. We've done extensive research and we've worked with attorneys to help us understand some of this language, but this is a whole other discussion in terms of safety and testing and so on for handmade products. And, because of that handmade part of our company, we qualify as small batch manufacturers, and it exempts us from certain testing standards. We still make sure that we have the proper information on any of the fabrics we use, which is a bonus of working with a reputable fabric source, for instance, who can get you that kind of information so you know that you're covered. Really, that goes for all sources, whatever kind of materials you use and the stuff that you create. So I think that's one other kind of pointer I'd say is just to be aware. I mean, even if you're handmade and you think it's, you're small enough to kind of fly under the radar, or maybe that stuff doesn't apply to you, it may not, but are you willing to take that risk? And we weren't.
Right. Right. That's a whole topic, another topic that I think would make for another really interesting piece, but for another time.
Yeah.
But I appreciate
absolutely.
you opening the door to it, because it is actually something that's deeply concerning to most people who make plush toys. So
yeah, and it's one of those things that kind of, again, it speaks to what we were talking about. It's just take your business, whatever size and whatever whatever size you are, just take it seriously and take it professionally.
Correct. Absolutely, 100%.
But have fun. I mean, I think that's the important thing, right? We can talk
Right.
about lawyers and manufacturing and so on, but if you don't enjoy it, then don't do it.
Right, because in the end, it's a mustache wearing a mustache, and you should keep that in mind.
Yep.
Well, Shawn, thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet, Abby, and I appreciate your patience on getting this all together.
Oh, no problem. So anyway, keep in touch, and I'll talk to you later.
I look forward to the post.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.